In this video, we're going to discuss the importance of the proper distance away from the golf ball at address. I'm going to go over some common cause and effects and issues that you may be struggling with in your swing because of your distance away from the golf ball. And then I'm going to wrap it up with a very simple process to get you in that proper distance from the golf ball every single time. My goal with all of these videos is to create light bulb moments, get you thinking a little bit. So let's head to the lesson tee, get those wheels turning, get you hitting the golf ball as good as you possibly can. So I want to start off by going over a few common cause and effects for poor distance from the golf ball. As I stress a lot on this channel, if you don't have a good approach to your setup, if you are not fundamentally in a good space at address before you take the club away, it is going to have a chain reaction and not a positive chain reaction for most players. And you're going to be left with just simply compensating for your golf swing. And a lot of times players just go right for the complex dynamic stuff and they skip over some of these basics when a lot of the things that happen in the golf swing can be directly tied back to these fundamentals. And I want you to get really good at looking at your own swing and being able to figure out where certain things are coming from. Now, obviously, my job as a coach and a teacher, I rely on people coming to me for help. But at the end of the day, I want you to be able to figure out some of this stuff on your own as well. And the basics of the setup are certainly one of those things that you can figure out and work on. So I hope what I'm going to talk about here today, like I said, really get your brain going and get you thinking about this stuff, maybe a little differently than you have in the past, or maybe just reminding yourself to focus on these core pieces of your puzzle. So let's head back to the tee over here, and I'm going to go over a few different cause and effects for hitting some weird shots because your distance is poor from the golf ball to start. So before I dive into the simple process of getting the proper distance from the golf ball, let me talk about a few cause and effects that happen when you're not in the proper distance from the golf ball. Now, over 25 years of teaching and coaching, I've worked with tens of thousands of golfers, and most of the time when I see an issue with this, the golf ball is too far away from the body. Now, there's no question, I do see players that have their hands too close and the ball is too close to the body. But honestly, it's fairly rare in the big picture. So if a player has a golf ball too far from their body, number one, they have to reach to go get that golf ball. And I'm going to pop the pressure mat data up on the screen right now so you can see this a little bit deeper. Now, when I reach for the golf ball, what do I naturally do? I naturally go on my toes, so I lose my balance right away. Now, most golfers aren't going to just set up here on the toes and swing from the toes. What most golfers do, they find balance. Now, how they find balance typically is taking their hips and pushing their hips back. So what that does, I mean, you can see on the screen right now, if I'm on my toes and then push my hips back, see how I get balanced? But what happens? At what cost? The hips go back, the center of my hips get beyond my foot. Now, I recently did a video on this exact topic. I will put a link down in the description below. Go watch that, because I want you to understand the cause and effect of that. And a little hint, it causes early extension. So your distance from the golf ball could effectively be the root cause of your early extension if you deal with early extension. I'm not going to say that is the root cause of everybody's early extension, but that could be a piece of the puzzle that causes early extension. And again, we do that because we're humans. We're trying to find balance, and we will find balance there. We will get into a balanced position. What ends up happening when I do that? The shaft gets lower, my vertical shaft plane gets flatter. So from here, most likely my club is going to work around my body. The club head is going to get inside. A lot of players struggle with an inside takeaway. Why? Because the ball is too far from their body. And again, I'm not saying everybody, but that can be a piece of the puzzle that causes that. Because if I'm too far away, we need to counterbalance, we're going to go in. Now, what happens when the club goes in? I did that and I didn't even realize I was doing that, but that's my body working. Club goes in, the mass, the weight, the force gets thrown in. I now go on my toes. I'm not going to be able to produce proper rotations on the way back if that is the case. If I go on my toes, I can't get my trail hip to go around. I can't work the vertical forces in the ground to my advantage. I can't work the torques of my trail foot and my lead foot to my advantage. There is going to be no force couple. Now, there's no test right now on force couple, and I don't expect you to understand that right now, but I am gonna do a video on that. And honestly, it sounds technical, but it is something that a lot of golfers should understand because it affects rotation and how the hips rotate, how you use the ground, speed, power, all of that stuff. So make sure you subscribe if you're not a subscriber because I have that video coming up. But it will affect your body's ability to create that motion down below. And all of this could literally come from your distance from the golf ball. Now, another reason why golfers will place the golf ball too far away from their body, they'll do this on purpose, is they're essentially trying to create space to deliver the club from the inside. They may have an over-the-top move, and they think by giving themselves more space, they'll be able to work the club more from the inside. But here's the problem. Now, what ends up happening is most players are going to work this way because the ball, relatively speaking, is too far away. As soon as I go out of my toes, I'm going to have to push my hands out to counterbalance the force going in this direction. So now the over the top potentially could get worse. So you're trying to fix the effect with the wrong root cause of it. And I understand in theory why people do that. They give themselves more space to deliver the club from the inside. Unfortunately, in most cases, it works the opposite. It actually produces more of an over-the-top swing. And I have enough students that when I work with initially, I'll do some database testing, and this is their root cause of their over-the-top. And essentially what I do with them is the opposite. I shove the golf ball really close to them and say, hit that ball. And you know what happens? You know how their body self-organizes? That club has to stay tight. Their lower body has to work better. You know, going back to that force couple, the force couple actually gets better. Again, there's no test at the end of, on this video relative to that yet. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a video on that. But the opposite is true a lot of times in terms of getting players to move their body better. So sometimes the obvious isn't exactly where the answer lies. So as you can see, there are a lot of different things that can happen when the ball position is too far away from the body or on the opposite end, too close to the body, because the body has to react accordingly. It's just physics. It's just biomechanics. The brain and the body are trying to do the best they possibly can with what they have to work with in that moment. And until you fix that distance away, those cases will never be solved. They'll never be fixed, no matter how hard you try. And sometimes it is as easy, take that with a grain of salt, to just get the body in a better position, distance relative to the golf ball, and start hitting the golf ball better. At least it gets the ball rolling. It gives your brain and your body an opportunity to put the club in the right position more consistently. So let's talk about how to get into the proper position and the simple process to get this job done. So let's talk about the simple process to get into the proper distance from the golf ball every time. I want to make sure you are aware of this process. The hardest thing in golf, you can't see yourself. So we need to have a process to make sure the reel and the feel match and make sure we're in the right position. So let's start with the irons. I'm also going to include the hybrids and fairway woods in what I'm going to talk about here, because all of these clubs essentially have a downward angle of attack when we strike the golf ball. So we're going to put those in one bucket, and I'm going to put the driver in the other bucket because the driver's on a tee and we're working the club up on the golf ball. So the first thing we have to understand is that posture is also connected with your distance away from the golf ball. So we need to have a good posture setup, no matter what your body type is. Some players have bigger upper torsos, some people have longer legs than their upper torsos. This process is the same for every essential body type out there. So when you get set up to the golf ball, you want to bend from your hip sockets. You don't want to bend from your shoulders. You don't want to squat too deep with your knees right away. You want to bend from your hip sockets, then you want to get a nice soft knee flex. Now, when I bend from my hip sockets, I now can create space. And what I mean by space is the distance between my hands and my legs. Now, if I get in the proper posture, and I'll show you from this angle, if I get into the proper posture to dress, I should be able to take my hands, place them on my thighs, and my fingertips are really just going to be just above my kneecaps or touching the top of my kneecaps right there. That's where I know I've created enough bend in my upper body at a dress. If I am too deep, what's going to happen is my hips are going to push out too much, so I find balance point. And again, go back to that video that I talked about earlier on hip bend, and it'll make a little bit more sense. I go a little bit deeper into that in that video. And then ultimately we want our knees in just slight flexion. But again, we're bending from our hip sockets, arms are hanging down. We can touch just the top of our kneecaps right there. That's when we know we're in the proper bend from an angular perspective. And again, it doesn't matter what your height is, your size is, it's all gonna be very, very similar. So I'm gonna get into that position. I'm gonna move the ball out of the way. I'm gonna get into that position. Boom. Now, if I just let my hands and arms dangle, absolutely no contraction of my muscles right now, you'll notice my wrist joints, for the most part, are underneath my shoulder joints at that point. This, I can wiggle my arms and move my arms back and forth really just like a wet noodle at that point. And you know what? They're always gonna swing on that same plane. Now, let's say, for example, I got into good posture, but my arms were extended out a little more. Number one, my muscles have to contract in order to actually place them out there and hold them out there. Now, if I was to let them relax, they're going back to this position. They're gonna find that position. Now, if I'm too close and my arms are too close to my body, where are they gonna go? They're gonna go back. They're always gonna find that position right there. That's a very natural, neutral position for the most part for our body. Now, how does this relate to the distance away from the golf ball? Well, let's say all things are equal. If I'm reaching for the golf ball, my muscles, number one, are contracting to reach. I am gonna have to put the club back in that same spot. Now, absolutely, there are some players out there that have a little extension, a little reach, and they can return the club every time. Their impact conditions are great and they play great golf. Those are the players that I don't touch because the matchups are all there and it works for them. Now, I'm not saying they have, this massive extension. They may be a little bit extended, but it works for them. And this is why I always say in all my videos, I'm trying to give you a guideline. I am trying to give you a map to follow, to think about, to get the brain going. I'm not saying 1000% whatever I say is gonna work for everybody. Everybody is slightly different, so there are nuances to this overall. And again, if I'm too close, my arms are gonna wanna dangle back out when I swing. And again, my muscles have to contract. So if I get into a position where I have the good posture, my arms are hanging right from my shoulder joints, I could literally take my trail hand, take it off the club, let it dangle. It will literally go right back to the same place on that club. So if I turn and face you, if I let my right arm dangle, my trail arm, it literally will swing right back to the same place. Now you can imagine if I was reaching even a little bit too much and I let my trail hand off and let it dangle, see how it doesn't go back to the same spot? This is the place that the arm path wants to naturally swing through. You obviously can make adaptations in the swing. But if I'm too far away, it's gonna pull back in. So from this angle, if I'm reaching, and then I let my arm dangle and relax, it's not going back to the same spot that I started. So that is a process that I like all of my players to follow, especially if you struggle with the distance away. Get into your setup, go through your process, get into your setup, and then let your trail hand off the club. And if that trail hand can swing right back onto that club, for the most part, you're in the proper distance away from the golf ball. And then you can say, hey, that's not the thing that's creating issues with my swing, because I'm good there. Just like stance width, just like all those other things. If all the basics are good, then you can look down the chain of events that happens for another cause and a cause and effect. Again, you reverse engineer everything. That's coming from a teacher's, coach's mind. You have to look at all of the core stuff and then reverse engineer everything and find where the issue is. Now let's talk about the driver for a second. So the big difference with the driver, it's on a tee. Our body has different tilts. The ball position is more forwards. The vertical shaft plane is naturally flatter. It is absolutely 100% okay, and I want this with most players, to have a little bit of extension. It matches the tilts, it matches the angles that we're trying to produce with the club head traveling up when we strike the golf ball. It's a better matchup for that. If I get too close to the golf ball, or even in this type of a position, I may get too vertical on the club. And I do see that with players. It's rare because most players are reaching a little bit with the driver to begin with. But I do see that with some players. Again, the whole caveat to all that is, yes, there are, on a rare occasion, you'll see a player with a driver that sets up very similar to the iron and hits it great. Because of the way their body moves, and that's fine. We would never touch that. And if you are doing that, continue to do that if you're a good driver of the golf ball. So you have a simple process. You understand the cause and effects of if you're not in the right position, what potentially can happen. You have some more tools now to add to your practice bag. Practice this. I know it's not the most fun thing in the world, but this is something you can also do at home. Do it in front of a mirror. Film yourself, make sure you're in the right spot, put the feel and reel together with what you're seeing, and you're gonna hit better golf shots. You're gonna be more consistent because your process is more consistent. The better we get at consistency, not just with the swing, but with your processes, you're gonna play better golf overall. I'll see you in the next video.